Everybody at the Giant Health Conference and Exhibition. It's fantastic to see you all this morning, and we aim to make the next 50 minutes probably the most valuable, dare I say it, of your time at the conference, because we're going to be looking at means by which you access the National Health Service and social care sector here in the United Kingdom. And to help me with this exploration, we've got an absolute bevy of beauties from within the world of health and social care, all hugely experienced and expert in terms of guiding and advising businesses, be they medtech or service or software, to enter this sector. I'm just going to introduce them all very quickly. We have the fabulous Tony Kyprios, who is a digital entrepreneur. Tony, say hi.
Hello.
We have the supreme Nishan Santares, who is a director of the Association of British Health and Technology Industries. Say hi, Nishan.
Good morning. Hello.
We have the humongous Hugh Hamer, Chief Executive of Williams Medical Supplies and Board Director of DCC Vital in the distribution sector. Hugh, say hi.
Morning, everyone.
And we have the sublime Shane Tickell, the smoothest man on the conference this morning. Shane is director and founder of Temple Black. So look, let's cut to the chase and move along here. We're just going to have a conversation over the next 45, 50 minutes, something like that, using the combined expertise of my guests. But if we could start, I'm going to ask, I'll come to Tony first of all here. How should an aspiring medtech or service provider or software entrant to the National Health Service or social care, how should they prepare themselves in the first place? Have you got any top tips that they should be considering before they even climb on a plane and come here for the first time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. Yes, absolutely. I think that before climbing on a plane, even before current circumstances, there's a hell of a lot of what we call the basics of strategic planning. So first of all, say you're either a Spanish company or a Polish company or a German company, that's your home market. You should have at least been able to have traction in your home market and validation with pilots, efficacy, commercial planning. And then you're obviously thinking about your international journey. And the UK is certainly going to be one of the top three suspects for that. And you've got to have to assess the UK versus US versus other markets as well. And then it's really a case of what sort of company you are, whether you're a medtech company, which is not really my expertise, whether you're a digital therapeutics company, which is more in my area. And then you've got to think of what sort of organization you want to have, whether this market is the primary market for you, and your routes to market. And I think the key thing in entering the UK in any sophisticated market like we have is to find the right partners, agree on the brief, be aware of the brief you have, because if you go in without a clear brief or without strategic goals, even the right partner isn't going to be able to help you. But being able to do that, and really whatever you've done in Spain or Germany or wherever you've come from, you need to get new validation in the UK. So new pilots, new clinical trials, all of those things effectively may have to be repeated again, but you base on the premise of what you've done before. And I also do some work with the Global Entrepreneur Program, which is part of DIT. And we help companies up and coming that want to move their headquarters here. So there's certain stuff with the DIT you can get involved with. And also, of course, with UK Health Gateway and other partners, it's just very important to get to know the real partners here that can help you make the right connections, because it's a relationship business at the end of the day as well.
People buy from people, Tony, has always been the case. Nishan, lovely to have you with us. Have you got anything that you'd like to add or amplify in terms of Tony's comments, I wonder?
Yeah, thank you, John. And just to build and perhaps amplify Tony's, I was going to come to the point around routes to market. And Tony's made a couple of distinctions there about digital technologies and devices. Once you have established what the value proposition is for your solution or your service, then I think a really important consideration is going to be seeing the NHS as a single customer is always a big challenge. So if your customer is about secondary care, hospitals, or primary care or community, and then social care is a very different setup in itself, then I think it's about considering what the appropriate route to market is. And I'm making some assumptions here, John. I'm assuming that the product, service, or solution has got all of the appropriate regulations, that you're commercially ready. And based on that, then it's an assessment of saying, am I going to try and go to market by myself and directly? Am I going to find the right partner and collaborator to then help potentially de-risk my route to market process? And ultimately about the styles of customers within the NHS and the social care that you're trying to target. So my recommendation would be to give some real consideration into how you wish to approach this very large, very often fragmented and sometimes potentially confusing customer base by considering the routes to market options. Hope that's helpful, John.
Thank you, Nish. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those points as we develop this discussion. I'm going to come to Hugh next, because Hugh, clearly you sit as the head of, if you don't mind me saying, the preeminent distributor of goods and services to primary care, and certainly through DCC you have interests across the entire health and social care landscape. What advice, just off the bat, would you have for somebody before they get on that metaphorical plane and come and start thinking of pitching to you at Williams Medical Supplies for a partnership?
Yeah, I think it's a build on what's already been talked about. I think it's really important, whoever the manufacturer or the service provider, they understand, okay, what are the technical requirements for the UK? Has the research been done, and actually from a quality and technical perspective, have all those boxes been ticked? So I guess that's the first part, and there are businesses that can help in the UK with some of those challenges if you don't have the expertise in the area that you are manufacturing in. And then I guess that from our side, the key then is actually what is the patient condition or the problem you're trying to solve, and that kind of gets you probably into what is the appropriate distribution channel. So is the product relevant for what care setting is the product designed for? Is it designed for a hospital secondary care environment? Is it solving a solution there? Is it solving a solution in the primary care environment? Or is it solving a solution in the home care environment? Or actually, is it something that actually spans all of those care settings? So that will help you start to look at who is the appropriate distribution channel or partner to use in the UK. And I think it's always, as already been mentioned again, is your intention to try and go directly and have your own field sales team in the UK? Or you're actually looking for a partner that can do the sales and distribution and marketing for you. So it's really around, let's take the quality as quality and regulatory ticked. Okay, what's the solution? What's the patient condition you're supporting? And that'll help inform actually who's the correct distribution channel to use when you come into the UK.
I think you make a really important point there, Hugh. You didn't say it in so many words, but understanding the structure of the National Health Service and social care sector here is, I think, a really important first step. Don't assume that because you've grown your product effectively in your homegrown market, your country of origin, that actually here in the United Kingdom the structure is similar. And there's change going on all of the time. I mean, we have integrated care systems that are being brought into being right now, but is going to result in huge structural change for the sector. I'm going to come to Shane, if I may, and just say to Shane, have you got any guidance you'd like to give people about how they might figure out the structure and understand, to use Hugh's point, which particular sector their product is most applicable?
I think that last bit, John, is the key thing. If I build on what the gentleman have said earlier, which is all brilliant advice, is do you really know your market and what part of the market are you trying to supply? So I think in the NHS, we know there are over 10,000 different organisations, and there is a big assumption. So 7,400 might all be GP surgeries, but actually, is what you're trying to supply, is it all the same? Where is the market in relation to what it is that you have? Is it ready for it? Are there already 10 people supplying it? What is it that's unique about yours? But trying to understand the market is complex. And I would say in each country, each of our home countries, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, are smaller communities. They tend to work rather well. They know each other. So you might have 12 health boards in Scotland. Northern Ireland is very integrated now. And I think Wales operates that way too. But in England, we now have 42 integrated care services. And inside each one, there are hundreds of organisations. So I have to say, John, it isn't an easy, there isn't a quick, here's how to do it once. But we are rather lucky over the last decade where the country has invested in academic health science networks. And they do cover 10 regions across the country, and they work nationally too in England. And they invest quite heavily in helping people come to market, helping them prepare, helping make sure they've got their questions ready. And I think it comes back to, I think what is the key art in selling is, what is it that's unique about you that's different to other people in the marketplace too? Be really clear about the value you're going to bring that's either different from somebody else or doesn't exist somewhere else yet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the frustrations that I've had over the sort of 15 years that UK Health Gateway has been advising people is it's very frustrating when people come to us for help. But you know what? They think they've already got all of the answers. So they're just taking the example of their home market, and they're just assuming that they can apply all of those things that you've just described in terms of what's the differentiated proposition, what's their route to market, what's their pricing, what's their business model. They're just assuming that all that will be a cut and paste for over here. And it's an awkward conversation always that we have to persuade them that there's going to have to be a different way to do this. All right, well, look, let me move on, if I may, because that's a kind of a great start for us, and thank you all for your contributions. Now they've got on the plane, they've come over, they've done some market intelligence, they think they're ready to start engaging with the likes of Hugh and so on. What are the typical obstacles which they are going to face here, as opposed to their home market? And perhaps if I start, let's go in reverse order. Shane, I'll start with you there and work back to Tony this time. Go on. What do you think?
You gave us the clue there, John. I think if you've done your homework, we need to understand, and I would say everybody's busy. Nobody is sitting waiting for you to call and turn up. So you need to be clear and concise about that proposition and that flexibility of charging mechanisms. And I would say be prepared to adapt, but also you're going to need to find some champions, somebody who you might have found through your international network who is open to helping you on the ground explore and to research. But I cannot emphasize enough about being clear and concise in your descriptions. What is it that you're offering? And I have to say, too many times, and in my previous role, John, a CEO of a previous company, I was approached so many times by companies from all over the world. And the first thing that irritated me was they didn't even research my product to know that we overlapped or not. And that was the first thing. So you really, it's about that research, about that time. But actually, I think many people are really happy to give their time to a fellow entrepreneur, salesperson, CEO, to help them understand if there's something of value. People will give you time for a cup of coffee. And I think the more you invest and respect that time, I think you can learn an awful lot, actually. And there's a lot of places to network. And maybe we can come back to some of those organizations later on.
I'm sure we will. Hugh, I'm going to come to you. Let's move this along. Obstacles that people are going to face.
I know we've talked a lot about it already, John, but I think that you understand the market and let's give it a given, you understood enough about the market and you have the technical requirements in place. But I guess one of the ways to get to good learnings and advice is some of the pitfalls I've seen when people have bought products. So yes, we have the technical piece covered off. We understand what we think the route to market is, but actually there can be some specific requirements in regions. So for instance, Wales may have a different regulatory requirement to England and to Scotland, and their subtleties. But unless you really have networked into the right people in the Welsh NHS and the English NHS and the Scottish NHS and regionally, you can fall foul of the fact that you think actually the UK is just one marketplace. and it truly isn't. And I think that's something I've seen new entrants fall foul of many times, thinking, okay, I understand what the UK does, but there's some real subtleties when you get in. And I guess just to add to the one point that's said as well, everyone in the UK, everyone globally is exceptionally busy, and people have always got time for interesting and new innovative ideas. But I guess we see a lot of time wasters as well. So it's just being able to actually, with getting accurate information and what we've been told about passing legislation, understanding the market, actually we're seeing that when we're talking to people, the talk matches the reality. That's an important thing as well.
That's a great observation, Hugh. Thank you. I mean, one of the elements therein is, in my experience, the NHS, if you just see it as one door to go and kick down, you're going to have a very sore foot after a fairly short period of time. But the second thing is, we don't like being sold to. Actually, we prefer to be helped to buy. Does that make sense? Nishan, can I come to you? There's a theme. We don't like being sold to. We prefer to be helped to buy. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
I think so, John. I mean, I think people don't like being, ideas pushed onto them. That's for sure. And one of the biggest hurdles, it's kind of building on the last two comments, is seeing the NHS as one big customer that can give you a big order is not the right way to approach it. There are regional variances, and actually even inside regions, one hospital inside one region may well behave very differently to another hospital, and that is a big hurdle, a real source of frustration to those who come into the market with fresh eyes. So having the right opinion leaders and the champions who understand what you have as an offer and can either refine or help you iterate that so that you better understand the needs of another organization is really helpful. So I think people who do come into the market quickly realize that you might consider a need universal, but one organization to another has very different perspectives on it. So I think you're going to have to be able to rapidly adapt. And to your point around the fact that nobody likes to be sold to, try and find the opinion leaders who can help you really kind of find that need, so that people quickly latch on to the fact that your solution is going to help them. And then of course all the other points around other hurdles that exist. People accepting your value proposition, finding the right buying route can slowly start to be broken down as well. But what I would say is that the biggest hurdle you're going to find is, you're absolutely right, John. The single door to the NHS is often very difficult to find, and many people are out there to try and help you. But just be aware that there are going to be regional and local variances that will frustrate and be challenges, all of which can be overcome. But you need to be aware of those.
Thank you, Nishan. Tony, if I were to suggest think national, engage local, do you think that is sensible advice to provide to our audience today?
I think it's essential advice, John, and I'll pick up what Hugh was mentioning earlier about the regional differences. I'd probably emphasize even more that, let's say we're in Liverpool now, and you're a pediatric or women's health or an oncology therapeutic solution. You have some of the world's best hospitals just in this region. So, Invest Liverpool would be one of your targets, and the LEP here, etc. So, I think having a local partner before you enter is important, because they will look at the nuances, not just in terms of differences between the Outer Hebrides and Wales versus London, but also some of the centres of excellence that exist here. Leeds, for example, in the Open Data Institute and all these sort of things. So that's one thing I'd certainly say. The other thing is, I think Hugh also mentioned about time wasters, and I think the ancient art of lead qualification is very important. Just know who you're speaking to, know that they're an influencer, know that they've got budgets, and all the rest of it. And I think also the fragmentation, you mentioned, John, about hurting your foot kicking down one door. I think actually the fragmentation in NHS gives you opportunities. You've got optionality. You can have many options going at the same time, and then you can sequence them. So it's much better than it's fragmented, because it gives you more doors to knock on and more angles to go through. And I think just the final thing I'd say is, be prepared for the long haul, but it is worth it because our healthcare system here is recognized everywhere from, USA to Asia as being one of the world's best. So breaking into this market and getting validation is valuable to any global strategy.
Thank you, Tony. Look, Hugh talked about the fact that we don't want the time wasters, and actually you've got to be able to be truthful and honest about any claims that you make for your product. How do we go about in this large and fragmented sector that we operate in? How do we help businesses, or what guidance would we give to a business looking to get in here in terms of how they go about proving the veracity of any claims they might be choosing to make? How do they engage with key opinion leaders? How do they engage to create evaluation studies worthy of the name? What should they do if you were sitting now looking to help and advise people? What would you say to them? And we'll start this time with Nishan, I think.
Yeah, I mean that piece about validation and knowing that someone can trust the evaluation of your product is an important one, John. And there are multiple levels to that. So at the top, up there may well be nicest view of that, and in devices they've taken really large strides to make their offer or assessing or evaluating your product more relevant to medtech companies. So they have particular styles of products and services to help new entrants into the market, particularly if you have a device or a digital tech combination. Below that, then I think is don't discount the evidence that you have accrued from other countries. They may not be able to be ported across and translated across as easily, but you shouldn't discount it, because to the earlier conversation about local partners who can help you, you may be able to find a local partner who's willing to explore a bit more that international evidence that you've accrued. And then, of course, as you start to develop that influencer and opinion leader network, they may themselves be able to help you with developing more studies into your product. The National Institute of Health Research and their Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure is always open to discuss how you might be able to do more evaluation studies in the United Kingdom. So you could start with trying to get a perspective of your product from NICE. You can think about translating the evidence that you've accrued from abroad and other markets. And then, of course, you can always start to think about local organizations that can amplify and reinforce some of the studies that you've got in mind already.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, just in case people are wondering out there, if I'm not talking clinical trials and very formalized evaluation studies, but what you will find is that people who work within the NHS and social care here in Britain, do you know what? We're a fairly innovation positive bunch. We're keen to help. We won't always charge you and that kind of stuff. A lot of time people are prepared to give of their advice for free, and don't shy away from thinking about that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a fair point?
Yes,
yeah.
In my opinion.
Thank you, Nish. I'm going to come to Shane as well. Okay, Shane, what advice would you give if people are trying to prove their case, basically?
I think Nish made some fantastic points, and Tony did previously too. You must respect people's time, and I think that's shown when you do your research. And building on what you said there, John, people will give of their time willingly and freely to a point. I think getting that validation. So what I've been really lucky in the last year, although I don't advertise, quite a few people have come to me where they've been CEOs or others for advice and guidance. And what I'm really thrilled about is seeing two things almost in equal amounts now. And that is when someone's got a new product or they're enhancing a product or about to come to market, they are as energetic about getting that integration right or making it work almost before they want to start selling it. And of course, they are a business, so they do have that investment they've got to make and then return upon. But probably never experienced quite as much energy go into that. So I found somebody who's prepared to give this a go, but I need to make sure it works and integrates with their product suite that they've already got. And that's music to my ears. And they're giving their own organizations a bit of grief and saying, please invest the time so I can actually demonstrate and show this. So there's an element of first of all, you've got to find the champion, you've got to find the pilot. And if I may, John, I would mention 2 or 3 organizations of how to make connections. So clearly, if you're in a specialist group, you might have your national or international group that meets. And it is about going and asking those people directly that you like, that you may have seen speak or be in a panel such as this one, where you think, actually, I think that person might understand what we're trying to do. And then it's about building a relationship that has a benefit to them. And I think that's about the respect. It's how does my solution benefit that person's work, role, organization, region, whatever it is. It's not about what you want to sell. It's about what benefit you can change to them. And I think if you get that across, people respect that, and they're more open to then potentially being a pilot or potentially introducing you. And some of the organizations we work with, I'm privileged to be involved in the Institute of Health and Social Care Managers. There's a proliferation of special interest groups. So if you invest the time and go, you can listen to people, you can speak to people. I'm lucky to be the vice chair of the Tech UK Health and Social Care Council. So if you're in technology, we represent about 300 technology companies in health and social care in the UK. And virtually all of us give of our time rather freely, and people are happy to make connections. So, it's actually really easy to get involved, but I cannot underestimate showing the respect to the market, your competitors, and the people you're trying to serve by really researching how you're going to make a difference and add value to those people.
Thank you, Shane. I'm going to come to Tony next, I think. As you can see, I'm just trying to be fair here, mixing it up a little bit for you as the audience, so you don't really know who's coming next, but more importantly, nor do our panelists, so they keep them on the toes, you see. Tony,
no,
how long should somebody be putting aside to consider this process of evaluation versus starting to actually make some effort with sales? What would you say in regards to that question?
It's a classic response, John. It'll be it depends. So I'll give you a specific example. It builds on what Shane has just talked about. So Prosoma is a digital therapeutics psycho-oncology platform. So they're actually talking. I'm talking to them a little bit later here, and it just shows you the value of things like Giant and the communities that they build and the conversations they deliver. So Prosoma, I've engaged them in Giant. They Emma, one of the co-founders, met with Shafi. Shafi saw the demo. He loves the product. He thinks it's got potential. They've already in a digger pathway in terms of breakthrough in Germany. They're on an FDA pathway in the US to do RCTs. But the UK was another one that they were just thinking how to enter. And really, it's finding the champion. You meet Shafi. He's a key opinion leader. He knows everybody, and he can open up a pathway to a pilot. That pilot may develop into something bigger. It could lead to some adoption. It could lead to a potential pharmaceutical alliance in some way. So it's you've got to come to these events. You've got to network. You've got to be resourceful. You've got to start conversations and then build relationships. And we are in the UK, so it's a great place. We are open. We are willing to help. We don't want to be sold to. It's not the hard sell type place. And that's why it's worth, in terms of the time question, John, it's worth being patient and just building the relationships and building multiple fronts of relationships. And I think just in terms of the Prosoma thing, it could be a 3-year journey to get into reimbursement. But by that point, it's a very valuable company. So so that's my view on that.
Good. Thank you very much, Tony. I mean, in my experience, it's this patience bit, which is always the awkward conversation to have, because often the companies that come, certainly to us, they're already getting a bit of pressure from their funders, for example, who are saying, come on, this is fantastic. It's already working in Canada and the United States and Australia and Finland. You need to start making some sales in Britain. And I'd like a weekly catch-up call with you, please. And you think, well, okay, I can give you a weekly catch-up, but that is not necessarily going to be the most interesting and useful half hour that you spend all week, because we move methodically. I think that's the expression I would use. It's not glacial, it's methodical. We're going through steps that properly validate the claims that you're wishing to make. Hugh, I'm going to come to you, if I may. What are the big mistakes that people make when they come and knock on your door? You don't necessarily need to name any names.
No. Look, I guess just to go back on the couple of comments I made before I answer your question, John, is I think actually you can use some of kind of your case studies from other countries. They are really helpful to just put some credibility behind the product, and they help build the case. And then working, as the team has said, if you know the market and the problem you're trying to solve for the NHS and for the patients, then you can find the right opinion leaders and the right people in the UK that'll help you get those little case studies and those little test pilots running in the UK. But I guess to answer your question, John, one of the difficulties we quite often come across here, and maybe we haven't talked about it at all at the moment, is actually the commercial side of things. Because ultimately, if you're bringing a product to market and you have all of the things we've already discussed in place, or even if you want to go to a trial or a pilot in a certain area, you have to have thought through how the commercial is going to work. Because actually, the NHS investing, so myself or our business as a distribution business, or the NHS themselves investing time in a test pilot without knowing what the commercials might look like, that's not going to get off the ground. So you have to have thought through, how is this going to work commercially? What margins are there in there for the distribution partners, the partners you're working with in the UK? And ultimately, what's the charging model? Is it something that's going to change the patient pathway and produce savings for the NHS, which are easy to put on paper, more difficult to demonstrate, even harder to extract that cost out of the NHS? So it may seem simple on paper, but it's quite difficult to do. Or is it actually you're going to improve the patient outcome? But again, ultimately, what are the commercials going to look like for yourselves? You're going to have to have thought that through before you take a product to market, or even consider those small test case trials.
Thank you, Hugh. It's a great point. I'm glad you've raised it, because we perhaps do need to talk about commercial. And in our experience, one of the big things is figuring out who pays. So if the product or system or software is adopted, who's going to actually fulfill the order and sign the check and give you your money? And it might sound a really simple question, and actually figuring out the answer to it can be a really tricky one, particularly in the world of digital solutions to things, where actually figuring out which part of, for example, an integrated care system is going to be the payer is really tricky. I'll just invite, perhaps Tony, would you like to make a comment on that, Tony?
Yeah, I think that's another reason why any company coming from abroad, particularly from the US to UK, needs to have specialists that understand economic benefit evaluation. So to really understand how the NHS measures value and measure, because it's going to be different. It's not going to be a typical, for example, prescription reimbursement here. It will be a license or payment directly from part of the NHS. So obviously it's a given, the patient outcome efficacy has to be proven. And then that's where case studies that Hugh mentioned are very important, because, there's parallels and we will look at that. But the economic benefit is extremely different. The cost may be much lower, for example, in replacing a drug or modifying efficiency versus the US. So the economic benefit analysis needs to be done. And there you have complex pay mechanisms within NHS, where, again, I would not wish for anybody to try and do that from first base. You will need the consultative experts here that have done this multiple times.
Thank you, Tony. Nish, same question to you. Any observations around identifying who the payer will be?
Only it comes back to your kind of strategic planning piece around getting quite granular about the customer. So is your key market hospitals? and then within that, then you've got an entirely separate kind of purchasing route to that where you're trying to penetrate into community or with GP practices. One of the biggest hurdles we often hear of in my organisation is that if you are working with hospitals, you are you've got to try and get onto certain types of purchasing agreements or purchasing kind of collective framework, and that then is about understanding understanding the key commercials and your route to market. So what I would advise those trying to enter the UK market is be really clear about the customer. Hospitals have a very different payment and order processing system compared to GPs, compared to social care. And that's just big generalizations, John. Even within that, there will be some nuance. So to the points shared earlier, there are plenty of people, my organization included, who can provide a bit more thoughts, a bit more advice and guidance on understanding where the budget holder sits and how you will essentially get paid or an order placed, because it is also about making sure that you get those invoices paid once the order is placed with you.
Shane, may I come to you? I want to tap into your expertise in terms of Tech UK and the activity that you have there, because clearly in this digital world that we're now firmly ensconced within, there's a lot of apps, there's a lot of digital solutions, and figuring out who will be the payer for those can be even more challenging. Would you like to make any observation there?
Absolutely, and thanks for the question and some of our work. So Tech UK, we spent a year working on a paper to try and make some recommendations, and we were looking at the formation of ICSs, for instance. I mean, the first lesson is the payers are changing, the buyers are changing. It's still very much, I think, some of the front door organizations you might go to, GP practice, but then you have primary care networks, and I think, probably Hugh and Nish would speak more about those. But my own experience is very much in the acute space and above, now the ICSs. So I think there's an element of being prepared. I mentioned before about being flexible. So I think you need to be flexible in two different ways. One is to try and understand, if you are entering a market that already exists, how are people paying for that? If you're identifying that actually you might be able to supply an ICS at a regional level, you might want an all-encompassing price at that level. You might want a national deal that you want to take somewhere centrally, but be aware, very few national deals take place. They are, like the rollout last year of Teams from Microsoft. I don't think there'd been a Microsoft deal done for probably 10 years or so. Invariably, a couple of pieces of advice, if I may, and this is from hard work of 20 years of supplying, and I did 5 years prior to that in buying. And there is no shortage of hard work in which you must do. And I say this with respect to suppliers, and it's quite common for us to have 100 suppliers in a room. And something that comes up quite often from some of our home market as well as the international market is, but I built a thing, or I brought a thing to the market, I was told it would sell, I've sold one, and it's not selling, I don't understand. And I would genuinely say to those people, and who have you spoken to? And they'll say, well, everybody. And the second thing I then say is, and how many times? And I don't say this with glee or being flippant. And building on something that Tony said before, there is an element of persistence. And John, you know this as well. It is about hard work, but it's also very much about listening. Do people prefer capital budgets or OPEX budgets? And different organizations at different times will have a different appetite for such. In the tech world, as we move into the cloud, I'm seeing more and more people in my own business, for instance, I can charge on a per citizen per annum basis in the form of a matter of pence. And others are moving to that type of model right the way up to here's a national license. So I think it comes back to homework and hard work. What is your market? Who are the buyers? And be aware that as ICSs form, and we're seeing in parts of Scotland at a recent discussion, I think in Aberdeen they were getting together, and where different organisations would have different budgets in the past, they're being open to be presented with and open to buying across the region. So flexibility, hard work, homework, my three key pieces there.
Thank you, Shane. Hugh, I'm going to give you the opportunity just to hit the commercial button once more. What advice would you give when people are going to come and talk to you about price in particular?
Firstly, it's the obvious one is to have thought it through, because everyone does. We've spent 3/4 an hour talking about quality, supply chain, knowing the market, but actually have thought through how the pricing model will work. You've got to understand, and that's the full life cycle. So not only around, okay, what's it cost to manufacture, what's it cost to get it to the market, actually what's the ongoing service cost, who's going to pay to manage the product in its in situ, and then actually even the costs around warranty. So actually who's taking responsibility for warranty, who's going to repair it on the ground. These are things that you have to think through the full life cycle of the product. And I guess just from a distribution partner like Williams, it really depends on what the partner wants, what service the partner wants in the UK. If it's a pure third-party logistics, there's a certain margin expectations of someone who's just effectively couriering the product into where the product's needed. Whereas if you were dealing with someone like Williams, who has a full marketing and a sales and marketing engine, actually the margin expectations there then are much bigger. So I guess it depends what service are you looking for in the UK. Are you going to go direct and just looking for a logistics partner, or actually are you looking for someone who can support you from a sales, marketing and distribution? And those margins are very different.
Thank you, Hugh. If I may, I'm just going to try to sum up what we've said, and then I can see we've got a couple of questions. I think if you're in the audience and you've got a particular question for any of the panel or myself, please don't be shy. We'll even ask it for you. But I think what we're saying here is this is complex, but don't let that put you off. There's plenty of help and advice and guidance available. And actually, if your product is good, and you can demonstrate the kind of veracity of the claims that you choose to make from it, and you can prove an economic case, and you can prove a health economic outcome case, do you know what? We are open for business. We'd love to hear from you. And you've only to look around this fabulous panel that I've assembled this morning. There are some sensational people able to guide and help in that respect. But don't mess around thinking that this is the work of a couple of weeks to come in here, appoint a distributor, and hey presto, all of your prayers are going to be answered. You're going to have to work at this. You're going to have to be methodical. You're going to have to build a considerable period of time into it. And above all, don't forget, this is a relationship business. You're going to have to work with individual people to convince them of the merit of what you have. Please make sure that you have people and procedures and processes that are up to that task. Don't expect to come in here and do one deal at the top of the NHS that will magically percolate down throughout the organisation. You will be able to repent of that view at leisure in your plane journey on the way home to your country. All right, we've got a question from Ether, who says, in some rare cases, the NHS's traditional health economic evaluation is insufficient to evaluate cross-category effects on the patient. That's interesting. For example, where some devices create cross-category impacts into other specialisms, how do you deal with a situation where the evaluators are only looking at one specialism benefit, but not evaluating competitors or do nothing options against these systemic patient impacts? Got to say, Ether, first of all, congratulations on swallowing the dictionary this morning. But secondly, what do we think, team? What advice would we give Ether?
I'd say just on that, it's going back. I think what Nishan said, and I think Shane as well. It's like you got to adapt to the situation. This question sort of looks like we've got something really great. How can the NHS adapt to us in understanding what we have? And I don't think it's really likely it's going to happen. Even if it is not effective in looking at cross-category issues, that's not going to really help you sell. So at the very least, you've got to show the benefit in the way that NHS wants to see them, and then the icing on the cake is, and by the way, there's these other benefits on top.
Thank you, Tony. Would any of the rest of the panel like to comment on that one?
I'd build on that, John. I've seen a couple of really large companies who have good products in other areas and thought, we have a phrase, Anglicisation. Not a problem. I can lift and shift, and I'll put that product into the UK, spend months trying to negotiate with senior people in the NHS, months legally looking at stuff, and actually they've underestimated the product. They've underestimated some of the locality stuff. And I've seen some companies spend maybe 1 to 2 years of investment of time and effort and a lot of legal time, but they just didn't do the research to start with. So can't underestimate that. Get to know the local requirements and local needs. And John, building on what you've said, the single most important thing, this is a people business. And we want innovation. We want things to make our jobs better, but you've got to be respectful. You've got to put your time in, build those relationships. And if you're appointing people, you've got to be really comfortable. Those people who are going to represent you match the values that you want. I wouldn't underestimate getting the right people either.
Thank
John,
you very
John,
much. Yes,
John,
go on, mate. Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that is about being patient and being tenacious as well. So yes, you got to do all the things that have just been mentioned, but I was just maybe think about an example that I was working with a team on 3 years ago, and it was from our point of view, it was just so obvious, but it took time. We didn't quite understand exactly what was going on the ground, but people bought into the concept, and it took 3 years to get that what seemingly a very obvious and very simple solution for the NHS. Because they had to change the way they did things on the ground. Yes, it worked, but it takes time to work this through. So if you've really got a great idea, a great product, and you truly believe in it, be patient, but most of all, be tenacious and keep driving that through.
Yeah, it's a lovely story to tell, Q. You know, I mean, we've got clients that we've been working with for 5 years. I kid you not. And we're still in the process of bringing them to market. That may horrify some of you listening, but it just means that, do you know what? They've made adjustments to their product or service. They've gone away and they've tested it in other countries, and they've come back, and finally it's about ready for here. So don't lose sight of that. I think the tenacity thing is a great word to use here, if I may. And if you want any final advice, I would just do this. If you're at all uncertain, start from the patient and work backwards. It's a phrase that my esteemed colleague Roy Lilly uses extensively, and whenever you're wondering, has my product or service got merit here, start from the patient, work backwards, figure out where the value is created, and then you've got a great chance. Well, look, we've kind of come to the end of time. I do hope you've enjoyed that jaunt around the world of market entry across the NHS and social care here in the United Kingdom. I have to pay huge tribute to my esteemed panel, Tony Kyprios, Nissan Santaris, Hugh Hamer and Shane Tickell. Gentlemen, you've all been absolutely fabulous. And if anybody wants to be able to contact any of those guys, you can either do it directly through me. That's John, Jon, no H. I'm a Jonathan, but that was only when my mother was really angry with me. It's John at ukhealthgateway.com, and I can put you in touch with any of these fabulous guys that have so freely given up of their time. But that's it for us for today. I do hope you've all enjoyed it. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you all the opportunity to wave bye-bye. You see, just like a panel show on TV, we all wave bye-bye at the end of it. Do hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks to you all watching in the audience or virtually from your sofa at home. I do hope you found that worthwhile, and enjoy the rest of the fabulous Giant Health Conference. Bye-bye.